Everybody, for all of you who are keeping up with all of the information going on in Oregon still, and you're still interested, the federal grand jury has returned indictments against the Bundys and all the co-defendants. Here you have the Bundys here. And, of course, all of the co-defendants, Pete Santilli included, everybody, right here. And you have Mr. Patrick and a couple of the other guys here. I forget their names off the top of my head. But basically today the federal grand jury issued those indictments against all of them. And it was interesting that a couple of the attorneys for the defendants here are kind of voicing their displeasure with the judge for not bringing in the defendants into court, and the indictment should have been unsealed. Well, the judge is acting like a complete moron and has kept the indictment sealed for 24 hours or longer, stating that because the indictment has been handed down, that they do not have any right to the preliminary hearing, so therefore, I guess this judge feels that they can keep the indictment sealed. That is according to this article here. Assistant U.S. Attorney Jeff Barrow said the indictments were returned earlier in the day, and he would move to unseal them in less than 24 hours. The public defender Lisa Hay, who represents Ryan Payne, one of the individuals, objected to keeping the indictment secret and the court's unilateral decision not to bring the defendants to the courtroom. Hay said she headed to the courthouse expecting to see her client. She said she believes the federal government told the U.S. Marshal Service a day earlier not to transport the defendants from jail to court before prosecutors had an indictment in hand. And she went on to say that this is a mockery of the grand jury process to alert marshals ahead of time. And I do believe she is on to something there. Now, what is interesting about this is what I want to share with you all, is that they're stating here that there is a possibility that new charges, hold on, let me find it here, goes on to state here that the indictments hasn't been released, but there are likely to be charges added. And these charges could include trespassing on federal property. Keep your memory on that right there. Trespassing on federal property. Destruction of federal property. Unlawful access to federal computers and possession of firearms on a federal facility. The thing is that that's going to be a hard one to prove because you don't know exactly who was possessing any kind of arms on this property that you're calling federal property. So that's going to be a hard one to stick with. Also, you don't know if they actually accessed federal computers because if they're password protected, how are you going to prove that they even accessed federal computers to begin with? Now, the indictments replace the earlier complaint, the initial complaint that was instituted against the defendants. So they're stating that they will be arraigned on these indictments on February 24th. Now, there should be a bail review hearing coming up here sometime soon, I'm sure. So here's what I find interesting. Public lands. This is according to the BLM right here, right? Okay. BLM, United States Bureau of Land Management, and I've already covered this before. Federal land is also referred to as a national or U.S. government. As such, it is owned by all citizens in common. That means it is owned by all of us. That's me, you, all of you people out there listening to me. We own these lands. It is the federal government that claims that they exercise our rights to these lands for us. This is according to the BLM. And their rights are exercised by a variety of national agencies with various legislated missions. Excuse me. If you purchase a gun then, or if I purchase a gun, does that mean that you can exercise my Second Amendment rights for me? Does that mean that you could speak on my behalf and say, hey, this guy here wants to rob a liquor store. Does that mean that you're exercising my right to speak for me and that I will be put in prison for what you say on my behalf? What happens if a lawyer speaks out and says something that could get me into trouble because he's exercising my right of freedom of speech? See, it doesn't work that way. And it shouldn't work that the U.S. government can exercise our rights to the lands that we own. And yes, I understand that you're going to say that, well, somebody has to take care of the lands that we own, or caretake, or manage. That's why they're called BLM, Bureau of Land Management. With all things, with an apartment complex where there may be managers, they can be hired and fired. We, as the public, determine who manage our lands for us. We don't have a federal government telling us that we're going to manage the lands whether you like it or not, and we're not even going to tell you that you have an option. When you have a trustee, when you have someone who is a trustee for your properties or whatever, in a trusteeship, if they act outside of law, well, then that means that you can fire that trustee, just like the federal government. We as a people, we can fire them and tell them, no, you're not going to claim these lands as your own, as federal lands, and you cannot use these charges against them because we are the owners of these lands and we dictate what charges can be brought against somebody. And we say, no, they were not trespassing on our lands because we own them. How is it that the U.S. government can bring charges and not ask us? How can they not ask us what we want? Does that mean they get to exercise exercise our rights for us in all aspects? Does it also mean that in the Second Amendment as well, that they could take our guns from us and say, well, we are going to exercise your rights to your Second Amendment for you? And then we will hold your guns, and if we want to give them back to you, just like they hold the public lands, and they decide when we get to use them, if we ever get to use them. Think about this here, folks. No one is supposed to exercise your rights in anything but you. And if we are going to allow the federal government to start exercising our rights for us, then they can start exercising our rights in all things, in all aspects, in every amendment. First, second, fifth, eighth, 10th, 11th. Hey, hell, why don't we just, the right to vote, how about we just allow them to vote for us and they can exercise that right? They've already been doing it. You might as well just come out and publicly do it, right? Well, we're going to exercise your rights to vote. Do you get it here that they are now pushing this into a position where we got to do something about this? If they're going to exercise our rights in one thing, then sooner or later they're going to exercise our rights in all things. And, well, that's just how I feel about that. You know what I find interesting about all of this stuff, right? With Pete Santilli. This is my opinion here, all right? My opinion only. I'm not speaking for anybody else. I'm speaking for me. It's a lot of people out there are doing a lot of talking, but if they're wrong, how many people are going to actually step up and say, you know what, I was wrong about him being an FBI informant? All of the other stuff aside, let's put all that other stuff aside, right? All of the money thing with the truckers and all of the Facebook takeovers and everything. Let's look at it just in the FBI informant aspect, right? So you say that, well, okay, there was a fax. Well, I've already stated, and I can prove emphatically, that we know that Susan, Pete's assistant at the time, was actually Deb Jordan. And we all know her now as Deb Jordan, right? Her real name. What's interesting is that Pete Santilli knew what her real name was that whole time and was only using her fake name for the audience. So surely, then he would have been using her real name, Deb Jordan, to the FBI in a fax instead of Susan. So what that leads me to believe is that whoever created that fax thought that Susan's name was really Susan and did not know that it was really Deb Jordan. So I think that on that fax that Pete Santilli would have sent a fax with her real name, because of course the FBI would have known what her real name was if that were truly the case. Now let's take a look at the other thing. I wanted to investigate this because I want to know for myself too. I've been hearing that Pete Santilli was actually released from that Cincinnati charge because of the FBI. Now, I have not heard any phone call from anybody stating or them making contact with here. If I'm wrong, please send it to me and let me hear it for myself. Do not be presumptuous here, folks. That's all I'm saying. Do not be presumptuous. I say that I work on this need for 100% proof. Why? Here, all of you big channels out there, all it's going to take is for one person to be pissed off at you about something, create some fake documents, spread it all around, and then what are you left to do? Either defend yourself or you don't answer to any of it, and then people will really think that you're guilty. Then what do you do? Pete Santilli finds himself in the same predicament, doesn't he? You know, he's tired of hearing it, so he starts banning people. I don't want to hear it anymore. Ban. Oh, I brought up that Pete Santilli was an FBI informant and about the facts, and he banned me. Well, I would ban you too, because I would be tired of hearing it. Because what am I supposed to do? How many people have come to me and said, Doom, just ignore the trolls. Just ignore all the crap they talk about you. It doesn't work that way. You have to step up and defend yourself, especially when you're in the right, because you're going to have to put a quash to the BS before it gets out of hand. Because if you don't step up and defend yourself, they're going to think that you're guilty because you didn't. That's my whole point. That's my whole point about this, is that all you big channels out there that are stating that you know something for a fact, what if it happens to you? It has happened to these big channels out there with Dabu 7, right? There were people that were on him, and I stepped out there and I said, wait a minute, how do you know this didn't happen? I caught a lot of flack for that, but you know what? I'm going to stand up for what's true and what's right. And the thing was is that people were not treating the situation fairly, and they weren't. I will stand up for anybody if I believe that something needs to be said about it. And I believe in this instance something needs to be said here as well. That Pete Santilli, there's no evidence that Pete Santilli was released out of a gun charge because of a FBI intervention. I called this court right here. And here is the court case number, C15CRA 33793. Here's what you need to keep in your mind. That if Pete Santilli was an FBI informant, the first thing that I would expect him to do is not to record the initial stop or when he was pulled over or whatever the case may be. Why? Because he could confer with the officer right there and say, listen, I work with the FBI. I'm an informant. Here, you can check with my handler. Here's the person's name. Here's their phone number. Call them up. I'm heading to because they want me to record everything that's going on there, blah, blah, blah. We would never even know it, and we would never even know that he was arrested. But, however, he recorded it. Okay, so that was one thing to me that I was like, well, that doesn't make any sense that an FBI informant type person would record the conversation when he could get out of it and never even, no one would ever even know it. But now we know that this has happened, that he's been arrested with a gun, right? Okay, so the other thing is now if he went and sat in jail for, let's say, a couple of hours, then surely he would have had somebody call the FBI and, hey, squash this whole thing for me. I need to get up there to Oregon and do my thing. But that didn't happen either, because when I called right here, and you guys are getting ready to hear the call, and I recorded this here. I want to show you exactly when I recorded this. This was yesterday, and I'm just now releasing it to you now.
Office of Tracy Winkler, Felony Division. Can I help you?
Yes, ma'am. I'd like to get some information on a case, maybe possibly a disposition or... Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Is it a felony case?
Yes, it is.
Okay, I'm ready.
Okay, C15 CRA.
Oh, wait, I'm sorry. Oops.
No problem.
Okay, C15 CRA.
33793. Now, I'm looking at the disposition right here on the date of 12/23. It said the disposition was ignored. Can I get some further detail on what exactly the ignored means?
Grand jury didn't find enough evidence to continue on with the case, so they ignored it. Up to 2 years, if they find anything, then they can bring those charges back with a different case number. So it's kind of in limbo for 2 years.
Okay, it's kind of in limbo for 2 years. Now, do you know, when it was brought to the grand jury, was there any kind of district attorney that was involved with the grand jury deliberations of this case whatsoever?
That I do not know, because grand jury is...
supposed to be uninfluenced, I know. I know.
No. What's that called? I'm so sorry, I'm drawing a blank, but... not secretive.
Sequestered. Sequestration.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So I don't honestly. I can give you their phone number.
Okay, great. That would be great.
Okay.
All right.
Let's see here. It is 946.
Okay. So anyway, here's my thing. If there was going to be FBI intervention in Pete Santilli's behalf, it would have been done before he even went to grand jury, because the grand jury sits to decide if there's going to be charges or not. Now, they can't allow it to go to the grand jury, because if it does, then the FBI would have no influence on the grand jury whatsoever. You have public individuals that sit there and decide whether charges should be brought. The FBI cannot influence their minds whatsoever, nor can the district attorney influence the minds of the grand jury. So all of this rumors and stuff like that, where somebody's spreading that the FBI had influenced this case, please provide me the proof, and I will expose it myself. I will also expose the truth if I find it myself. And so far, everything I'm hearing is that the grand jury, did not bring back charges against him. Now, that doesn't mean that they can't do it within the 2 years, as she stated. So now we see that Pete Santilli finds himself sitting in federal detention right now, or actually in the county jail, but under federal jurisdiction. And it's interesting that if he was working with the FBI as an informant, then surely they would have released him after about a day or two and just claimed that it was bail, and then they would have dropped the charges later, right? That's all they had to do, right? But he's now been sitting there for 7 days. How come nobody's coming forward and saying that, you know what? Hey, in my mind, it seemed like that Pete Santilli was an FBI informant. Now I'm starting to opening my mind a little bit here that something's a little strange, that maybe possibly he's not. Now, I know that some of you people out there, no matter what my words are right here, no matter what they are, you are still going to want to twist it in your mind to make it appear as if Peter Santilli is guilty of something. of being an FBI informant. That is your right to do. It is my duty to seek out the truth in all things and to share that truth with you of all things. Now, the last thing that I want to say about all of this, that is the reason why I don't go out there and attack people in the way that some of these other big channels have done. Dabu 7, I think that you need to come out and publicly make a statement, at least say, you know what, I want to wait until further evidence comes up, something. Because right now, the whole thing was, when I came out with that whole video debunking that fax, the fax is complete garbage. Complete and utter garbage. Have you heard Vinny Eastwood or Susan Posel come out and say, well, you know what, upon further evidence that you have exposed right here, we are going to distance ourselves from presenting this fax as being legitimate? But they're not doing that. So that tells you one of two things. Either Vinny Eastwood and Susan Posel together are the one who fabricated this document and are presenting it as legitimate, because obviously they haven't retracted anything about this document whatsoever in light of the newest evidence. Or they're so happy that Pete finds himself in the position that he's in that they really don't care about the document. They really don't care because, hey, they're accomplishing exactly what they want to accomplish, to make Peter look the way that they want him to look. If you put all of the things that I've just shared with you as a whole, then what you're going to find is that a lot of people were being presumptuous. I'm telling you, it's not fair if it happens to you. That's all I've been saying for the longest, everybody. It's not fair if somebody does it to me, because how many people are going to step up and go, you know what? I know Professor Doom better than that. He would never do that. How many of you are going to do that? How many of you are going to state that, you know what? Hey, those documents right there, man, whoa, man. Hey, Doom's guilty as all hell. And I will be attacked. And all it would take is for somebody to make up a bogus document on me. And before you know it, I would be losing viewership. I'd be losing subscribers. I would be having to, on my heels, defending myself. And the whole thing, would it be fair to put me through something like that just to smear my name, just to defame me, just because you hate me? Well, that's all I can tell you, folks. The evidence to me right now as it sits, and that's the reason why I will never come out and listen to anybody who tells me that somebody is guilty of something unless I am satisfied that they are guilty of something. Because if I am wrong, it would be unfair to them, just as it would be unfair to me.